Episode of NASA Connect. Learn how ancient cultures observed seasonal cycles and how the sun played a part in their observations. We'll also conduct a cool hands-on activity measuring shadows created by the sun and a gnomon. Stay tuned for another exciting episode of NASA Connect, Ancient Observatories.
Or welcome to NASA Connect. I'm Jennifer Polate, and this is the National Museum of the American Indian.
And I'm Dr. Stan Odenwald at an archaeological site in Mexico. Hola! This is NASA Connect, the show that connects you to math, science, technology,
and NASA. On today's program, you will see how ancient cultures found a connection to the stars. You will also learn how many of these societies were very sophisticated when making celestial observations.
You'll also learn about the mathematics and geometry used by these ancient peoples to make their observations. What you will learn today will absolutely astound you. But first, Jennifer, tell us about that building that you're in.
Sten, this is the newest museum in our nation's capital. As you enter the museum, hundreds of written and spoken words meaning welcome in native languages throughout the Americas are projected onto this wall. These people, not only here in the Americas, but also their brothers and sisters in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Pacific, looked at our starry skies. All of these people had a connection to the sun. In the museum, this room celebrates the sun. From this circle, the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, extend out of the building. The angles of solstices and equinoxes are mapped on the floor. A light spectrum is cast by the sun, which shines through the prisms set into the south-facing wall. Each prism is sighted to the sun for a particular time of day and season. The dramatic designs in this modern museum show the connection between astronomy, nature, and people. That connection is the key to understanding how the ancients looked at our universe, which is the theme of today's program. Today, we will talk to Native American astronomers. Dr. Stan Odenwald will treat us to the foundations of astronomy as we know it today, and he will fill us in on the celestial accomplishments of the Mayans. Throughout the program, you will be asked to answer several inquiry-based questions. After the questions appear on the screen, your teacher will pause the program to allow you time to answer and discuss the questions. This is your time to explore and become critical thinkers. Now, let's learn more about ancient observatories. The science of interpreting the relationship between the sun and the daily lives of primitive people is called archaeoastronomy. Archaeo meaning archaeology, and astronomy meaning the study of stars. Observing celestial phenomena is the one constant that unifies humankind throughout space and time. Ancient man knew celestial events followed cycles, circles, and these events could be recorded. Approximately 5,000 years ago, they devised a way to place stones in certain positions to align for lunar and solar events. Events like seasons were noted and found to recur regularly with certain positions of the sun and stars.
The Earth spins on its axis once every day and gives us the familiar experience of daytime and nighttime. For thousands of years, humans have used this cosmic cycle to regulate their workday, their meals, and their sleep. The Earth orbits the sun once every year, and from this we get the familiar 365-day cycle. Earth's orbit around the sun is an ellipse. Basically, that means an oval, with the sun offset from the center of the ellipse. Does this mean that we have summer when the Earth is closest to the sun and winter when the Earth is farthest from the sun? The surprising fact is that the distance from the Earth to the sun has absolutely nothing to do with the changing seasons. Our northern hemisphere is closest to the sun in January and farthest from the sun in July. So what is causing the change in temperature? Earth's axis is tilted by 23.5 degrees from a line perpendicular to Earth's orbit. What does this mean? To understand this tilt, we have to use a bit of basic geometry. An angle has two sides and a vertex. The sides are rays that share a common endpoint called the vertex. The angle formed by two rays can be named in a variety of ways. For example, the angle formed by ray AB and ray AC can be named angle BAC, angle CAB, or angle A for short. Notice that A must be the middle letter in both three-letter names because it's the vertex. You can measure angles using a protractor. The unit of measure is degrees. Angles can be classified by their measures as acute, right, obtuse, and straight. If the Earth rotated on its axis perpendicular to or at a right angle to the orbit, there would be no changes in temperature. The Earth rotates at an angle 23.5 degrees from this perpendicular line. It's a very small tilt, but enough to affect the sun's rays hitting the Earth. This is a great time to pause the program and think about the following questions. Why is the area near Earth's equator hotter than the areas near the poles? If the tilt of Earth's axis measured 33 degrees rather than 23.5, how might seasonal changes and temperature ranges differ? Teachers, it's now time to pause the program. The tilt of the Earth's axis gives us our seasons, and because of the extremes in heat and cold, it's very important to keep track of the changing seasons if you're growing food. This seasonal cycle is important to ancient and even modern people. In some parts of the world, like the arid climates of the southwest states of the USA, the growing season was so short that people could not waste much time getting the seeds in the ground at the start of spring. But how do we predict when the growing season will begin in the spring? For that matter, how can we tell when the other seasons begin and end? It turns out that just by keeping track of how high up the sun gets over the horizon at noon, you can determine the start of the seasons exactly. Almost all ancient people that relied on planting times discovered this little relationship. The start of the four seasons, summer, fall, winter, and spring, are noted by what astronomers call the summer solstice, the fall equinox, the winter solstice, and the spring equinox. At the start of summer, around June 21st in the northern hemisphere, the sun is at its highest point above the horizon at noon. As the sun begins its movement back away from its maximum height, the number of daylight hours has declined to an equal number of daylight and nighttime hours. This is the fall equinox near September 21st. A few months later, the path of the sun arrives at its lowest point at noon. The sun spends very little time above the horizon of the northern hemisphere, and the night is much longer than day. Welcome to the winter solstice, or start of winter, around December 21st. After a few more months, the path of the sun works its way higher in the sky, eventually arriving at a path where day and night are equal. This happens March 21st at the spring equinox, a vital time for planting crops.
Archaeoastronomers have found three types of early observatories: simple markers, circles of stone and wood, and temples. Early on, markers were used to create sight lines to the horizon, so that during the equinox or solstice, the sun would appear to rise exactly on the sight line. Stonehenge in England was set up this way, as were a number of ancient Native American buildings, such as the ones at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico and Hovenweep in Utah. England's Stonehenge is one of the earliest examples of an observatory in Europe. Stonehenge is a large calendar capable of predicting the equinoxes and the solstice. Before Stonehenge, in 3000 BC, the ancient Egyptians had devised a solar calendar of 365 days, the starting point of which hinged on the heliacal rising of the star Sirius, which also happened to coincide with the summer solstice and the annual flooding of the Nile. By being in touch with celestial phenomenon and their natural surroundings, the ancient Egyptians were able to predict events of great significance in their desert environment. At Abu Simbel, massively carved statues of Ramses the Great face east to greet the sun god Re, the bringer of light. As the sun rises each day, the statues are illuminated again, perhaps a sign of rebirth for Ramses. But the most compelling is a passage to the temple's inner sanctuary, which is aligned so that on October 18th, the sun filters into the sanctuary, illuminating a statue of Ramses. While October 18th doesn't mean much to us in the Western world, this October date corresponds to the beginning of the Egyptian civil year and the celebration that occurred during the time in which Ramses lived.
It was the Greeks, however, that created the first portable cosmological tool for keeping track of these motions, a stick. The Greeks actually called it a gnomon, and it was used to keep track of the shadow of the sun. Actually, it's a little bit more difficult than that because the shadow depends on your latitude. Again, if you are not near the equator, the shadow will be shortest during the summer solstice and longest during the winter solstice. For the spring equinox and fall equinox, the shadow will be halfway between the shadow lengths at the solstices. In the southern hemisphere, the shadows will be reversed, just as you all know the seasons are reversed. When it's summer in the United States, it's winter in Argentina. This all works pretty well if you're not at the equator. At the equator, the summer solstice sun casts a shadow in a southerly direction, and the winter solstice sun casts a shadow in the northerly direction. During the equinox, at the equator, the shadow disappears. Oh, and another thing that they were used for is sundials. And it looks to me like it's time to go back to Jennifer.
Okay, guys. Let's take a look at how a gnomon works and see the angle of the sun at certain times during the day. Students from Newcomb Elementary School in Newcomb, New Mexico will preview this show's hands-on activity.
Yat hello! We are students from Newcomb Elementary School. We are located in the Navajo Reservation in the Four Corners region of New Mexico. Tracking the passage of the sun in the sky continues to play a very important role in the life of our Navajo culture.
Traditional Navajo still use this system of tracking the sun's shadows to tell time and to tell the changing of the seasons. For example, when my grandfather herds sheep, he does not wear a watch like this. He uses the sun's shadow to tell time. It also helps him to tell when to take the sheep back home in their corral. It also helps him to tell when to plant corn and watermelon on his farm.
NASA Connect asked us to show you this program's hands-on activity.
In this activity, the students will make sun shadow plots every half hour, marking the ends of the shadows made by the sun and a gnomon.
You can download a copy of the Educator Guide from the NASA Connect website for directions and a list of materials.
Turn a cardboard box upside down. Tape a large piece of paper to the cardboard box. Draw two lines that are perpendicular to each other, from top to bottom, and the other from left to right across the paper. Mark its center with a dot. And make a very small hole in the center of the box using the point of a scissors. Stick the gnomon through the dot and the hole in the cardboard. Secure it with tape so that 10 centimeters is sticking straight up out of the box. Use a protractor to make sure the gnomon is perpendicular to the box. On a clear sunny day, find a large flat area. Tape the box to the ground on all four sides. Starting as early in the morning as possible, mark the end of the gnomon's shadow every half hour until the end of the day. Next to the dot, label the time of the day it was marked. You will analyze the data you collect by measuring angles and length. Remove the gnomon and draw a straight line from each dot to the hole that the gnomon was placed in. Measure and record the angle between the horizontal line drawn through the center of the paper and each marked shadow. Then, measure and record the length of each shadow. Using geometry, find and label true north on your sun shadow plot. Verify local solar noon using shadow length times and sunrise-sunset times. How do the lengths, positions, and angles of the shadows change? What do the changes tell you about the position of the sun throughout the day? Would the curve change if you used a different sized gnomon to cast the shadow?
And don't forget to check out this cool web activity for this program. You can download it from the NASA Connect website.
Great job, you guys. All right, let's review. We've seen how ancient cultures used the Sun-Earth connection to mark the season. And you've seen an activity which uses the placement of shadows to record the movement of the sun across the sky. Research regarding Native American astronomy has recently begun to gain headway in archaeoastronomy. Let's look at the ways Native cultures in the Americas use the Sun-Earth connection. Nancy Maryboy and David Begay are two indigenous astronomers from the Navajo Nation.
Yat-e, hello. We're here in Hovenweep National Park in southern Utah. I'm a Cherokee Navajo. I live not far from here, and I'm an educator on the Navajo Nation. A cultural astronomer means you deal with the astronomy of your own culture, and we put things within the context of a native worldview. Right behind me on the boulder, you can see an indication of a solar phenomena. On the boulder, there's two images. One's a concentric circle, one's a spiral. As the sun begins to rise, shafts of light come in from each direction. And as the sun continues to rise, the lights meet in the center. This only happens once a year. This phenomenon occurs on the longest day of the year and is a very appropriate way to mark time. This can be a very harsh environment to live in. It can be hot, it can be cold, and it can be very dry. In order to survive, people had to live in accordance with the natural environment, and that meant the natural cosmic environment, the sun, the moon, and the stars. It was very important to track the path of the sun and the moon and certain constellations. And to do that, people used natural markers like petroglyphs and sun and moon alignments. Remember, there was no watches, there was no timekeepers, there was no calendars.
My name is David Begay. I am a cultural astronomer. I've been living out here for many years. My clan is Maidishkijni. This clan is a descendant from the Jemez Pueblo people. And here is one of the structure at Hovenweep National Monument. This structure had many purposes, one of which was an observatory. The ancient had a profound respect for the movement of the sun and the stars. On the longest day of the year, the sun shines through an opening and the light falls on a marker. What people experience here is really a cultural experience. It's a whole life experience. People felt the movement of the sun. People felt the movement of the moon. It was a daily experience. Among the Navajo people, for the sun, when it reaches summer solstice, it's a total life experience. People used to talk about the solstice being a 4-day phenomenon. People used to say, the sun spent 4 days before it starts moving back the other way. So it's really something that was experienced, it was talked about, it was a part of the culture, it's been passed on through the generation. I think people talk about these movements in terms of days. I'm not sure if you can really call it special math. I don't think tracking the sun down to the second was important at that time.
These buildings and boulders are remnants of ancient civilizations, much like the ruins in Rome, the ruins in Greece. And today, they're still very relevant to us out here in the Southwest. We still see the same sky, and we're in awe of the technology that was employed to build these buildings and capture these solar and lunar alignments. Today, we look in the sky, we use some of the same knowledge that the ancestral Pueblans used. We use it for planting, we use it for setting ceremonies, and we use it to keep the earth in order. The balance between earth and sky is still very important to Native peoples.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks, David. You know, guys, one of the earliest Native American structures to observe the sun and the stars is Casa Rinconada, located in the Chaco Cultural National Historical Park. Casa Rinconada is a large kiva. Kivas are large circular rooms used for ceremonies by Native American cultures. Like Hovenweep, on the day of the summer solstice, a beam of light from an opening in the kiva precisely illuminates a niche in the far wall. For years, Chaco Canyon was primarily seen as a trade center, but with the advent of archaeoastronomy, Chaco is beginning to be seen as a center of astronomy and cosmology. So far on today's program, we have seen how the relationship between the sun and the earth weaved a connection between all ancient cultures. Now, much of the information from those cultures has been lost to us. However, other cultures have recorded that information, and now that information is being interpreted. For a look at one of these ancient cultures, let's return to Dr. Sten Odenwald.
Thanks, Jen. Perhaps the greatest ancient astronomers were the Mayans, who lived right here where I'm standing. The Mayans inhabited the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and Guatemala. These people made astronomical and seasonal observations which rivaled anything seen in Europe during the Roman Empire or the Dark Ages. These amazing people mapped the heavens, they evolved the only true writing system native to the Americas, and they were masters of mathematics. They invented calendars that are still accurate today, and without metal tools, beasts of burden, or even the wheel, they were able to construct vast cities with an amazing degree of architectural perfection and variety. The largest structure at this site is El Castillo, the castle.
That these temple builders were mathematically precise in their architectural designs is borne out by the natural phenomena which occur during the fall and spring equinoxes. In the spring, as the sun rises, the shadow cast on the steps appear to form the body of a serpent which slithers down the stairs.
Here at Chichen Itza, there is a structure unlike anything else ever created by the ancient Mayans. It's called El Caracol, and it actually looks like a modern observatory.
Its design didn't function the same way as our modern observatories. Instead, its walls contained many windows. Inside the dome, stones could be removed, enabling the Mayan astronomers to observe different parts of the sky. The Mayans looked at the sky differently from any other civilization. Being near the equator, the equinox passages were easier and more accurate to determine because the sun cast no shadow at local noon during this time. They also had great veneration for the Milky Way, 20.